Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
Yes, there are.
Today we have a special guest, Shanna Vavra. She is first and foremost a mother of 4 children, an intuitive Reiki master, teacher, LMT, spiritual journey mentor, and the host of Sense of Soul podcast. Finding herself somewhere between a theologian, Jungian, and omnis, she is a seeker at heart, uncovering hidden truths and giving them a voice. From the discovery of being an empath to her journey through ancestral healing and her study of the Gnostic Gospels. Through her personal experience of healing from the inside out, turning her pain into purpose, and discovering her light within, Shanna found the blessing in the lessons and inspires others to find their true sense of soul. So welcome, Shanna. We're really happy that you can be on here with us.
Well, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me into your space.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was listening to some of your podcasts today, just in preparation, and it sounds like a lot of really interesting information that you have and a lot of really varied topics, although along the same lines, but very varied topics. So
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell us some of your journeys?
Yeah. Well, I think that originally when me and my best friend Mandy had started podcasting, we just were hoping that it would land on whoever's ears that needed to hear it. And really, we just felt like we didn't want people to be alone because we knew what it felt like to start this journey, to awaken to a whole nother world, really. Once you're present in the world, it's like, whoa, I never, experienced this before, or what am I experiencing? And who do I tell this to? And so we just wanted to talk about it because I didn't feel like there was enough information out there quite back then. And this is only 4 years ago. And so much has happened since then with amazing podcasts like yours.
Well, thanks. And yours.
And yours.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like it is, and that was kind of what got us going too, was we've always kind of been interested in the spiritual stuff. And it was like, why not put it out to people that are looking for, how do I move through these things and where can I get some answers? Because some people are so lost with that.
They really are. What do I belong to? Like, what do you belong to in your spiritual? What do you really want to take in? What do you really want to learn for you? So since we've been doing this, we have learned so much more. It has just broadened us like, wow, and keeps broadening us for everybody we speak to. So it's amazing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a student like every week.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
it's just amazing. I feel so very blessed. And it just really was unexpected. This was not our original intention whatsoever. And, Mandy and I both had different paths, how they say, there's different paths to, a well. And we both awakened through different ways. Like Mandy had a near-death experience, and it was truly divine. And for myself, it was truly discovering that I was an empath, feeling all of this pain all my life. I realized I was carrying the weight of the world and everybody else's stuff. I was definitely not, I would say, going much out of the box when it came to many things. I was very conditioned. I'll just put it that way. Very conditioned. And I was doing all the right things that, I thought I should do, until one day I asked myself this question, and that was, how much of what I believed in was I told to believe in? And of that, how much have I actually experienced to be my truth? And I didn't know what to say. I was not living authentic. I was living everybody else's dreams, everyone else's expectations, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend, as a partner. And I would say the only thing I could tell you that I really could experience was like the love for my children. Really that was authentic. But everything, even my beliefs. And I had experienced, I would say, the Holy Spirit, like in church, I had felt that energy before, but I really was searching for what were my experiences that I could say was true. There were very little. There were very little.
But at least you knew that there was that feeling of having that
Mhm.
spirit, right? And so I think that's what pushes us further into our spirituality and into finding our path, is knowing that we can feel that spirit and that energy.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't have defined it for you. However, I grew up Christian. My family's very deeply rooted Catholic. I'm originally from Louisiana. I'm from New Orleans, deeply rooted, from like the late 1600s.
Uh,
So I actually have a Cajun line
well,
that comes from Canada with the Acadians
oh, really?
who were
Okay.
deported. And my ancestral journey was such a big part of my journey. I mean, once I really truly healed the past, present, and future, really it's a timeless healing, then that really opened me up and like made space for me to receive more light. But yeah, I have a great shaman who was a First Nation, and
Yeah.
his name is Etienne Pigaroche. He was from Trois-Rivières.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yeah.
And sadly, though, he is known as the apostate. So he is the great medicine man, the tent shaker, a sorcerer, they called him, that converted to Christianity.
Oh,
And that didn't sit right with me. So
Yeah.
I wanted to learn more. And, luckily the Jesuits who converted him and his tribe, they wrote volumes on Etienne. And so I was able to read firsthand, well, from their perspective. But what they would say when they would return to Trois-Rivières, they'd be like, "What are you doing? You're tent shaking again. You need to repent." And so, and so they, he'd go back to it. And then when they'd leave, he'd go back to his tent shaking, evidently.
Well,
But that's a travesty to me.
yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's like he lost his way, right? Like his true calling of what felt deep in his heart, I would think. I'm
Yeah, I can't
assuming,
even
but
imagine.
no.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Wow, that's quite the
great story, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So that started you on your ancestral healing then, through learning these
Well,
past things for yourself, or
well, being from Louisiana, and a lot of people don't know, but Louisiana was at one point, I'm in Colorado now, but it was even part of Colorado. Colorado was part of France, at one point. So, in Louisiana itself was bigger than France itself when France
oh,
owned it. And it went back and forth from France to Spain and went all the way up and down the Mississippi, which is why there was that connection with Canada.
right?
well,
And, what's interesting is that I did not know this until I went really deep, but that all of the lineages I had discovered were all forced to be Catholic. And I was like, oh, well, this explains a lot. Well, we're so deeply rooted Catholic. But yeah, I had an ancestor who was one of the first, in the first 5 boats that came over to um, New France, is what they called it at the time. And he was witness to those who were getting on the boat and made sure that they were baptized. You were to learn French and you were to get baptized before you went over. And there was a lot of Swiss, a lot of Germans. Actually, he was German. People don't realize that either, that it wasn't just the French that came over. They
right.
actually allowed these other these other countries to come over too. And then I had discovered that I had slavery in my tree as well. So I had some grandmothers that didn't even have names. They were just slave of the master. So I
Mhm.
went on a journey to find, one of them, I went on the journey to find her name. There was also one of the very first rules of the Black Code was that they had to be baptized Christian or Catholic, and they got Sundays off. And then I discovered it also was, um, of course, to the indigenous people, they had to convert.
Okay.
And so when I saw this, it just made me go down a little bit deeper into my religion. And I've been grieving that for some time now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that, especially if that was the way that you were raised, more devout that way, then right to actually shed that off of you it is like a grieving time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
We're both Catholic as well,
Yeah.
and Roman Catholic. Yeah.
Hmm.
But I know with me growing up, I mean, you had no choice.
Yeah. Well, those Jesuits, they were pretty strong. I mean, but when people think of how I got here, how do I come to these beliefs? Why am I following these traditions? You think about where they came from, you see in your ancestry of how that developed. I was quite shocked how mine developed. And when I think about Etienne having to, you know, leave and abandon his deep rooted indigenous teachings and practices just broke me. And I just felt that he was reaching through 12 generations, actually. That's how long it's been, to reach someone who would be open enough to receive this, because we're so deeply rooted Catholic that no one else in my family, until myself, would have been able to receive this. However, I do have the great voodoo queen Marie Laveau in my tree. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with who that is, but she brought voodoo to America.
Okay,
Oh.
I was going to ask you about that.
Well, that's
Yeah,
been
she was the first.
so
Yeah,
you had all
that was
these
the talker.
mystical people in your
I
lineage
know.
that, right, have passed it
Oh,
down, which is great that you are breaking that open to find this out, because I think as we do that, right, then we can look into those and adopt and see what fits us,
Yeah.
if
and
anything.
they live in me. They live in you.
Yeah.
If one of them had gone right instead of left, like, you may not exist.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, all of their stories, their trauma, and there's a lot of trauma. I mean, from each one of them, I discovered I had Jewish in me, which I never knew. My dad was quite a bit of Jewish, and either he didn't know or his family never told him, but there was all of this hidden stuff. There was this stuff that was shamed, buried. I had a great percentage of African American, which I'd never known. I mean, literally, I thought I was French and Italian. I barely have any Italian in me, and I'm more German Creole than French Creole. So, yeah, who would have thought? But there was all these things that were buried, and it came my purpose to give these stories, these people, my ancestors, my bones, a voice that they had never had before. I learned their stories. They lined up to tell them too. It was like 6 years of study.
Yeah.
And but the people, sometimes I'll talk to people who are historians and stuff. They're like, so where did you go to college for history? And I'm like, I didn't. I just learned all this through my ancestor stories. Yeah.
That is really neat. So how do you think that learning these stories impacted you on your journey?
Oh my God, like I said, it's a timeless healing. Not only did I give them a voice, but I literally saw patterns, not just like you would see patterns in this life. I saw patterns that had been passed down generation after generation. I come from French Creole women. The French Creole women are the first mixed race, right? That's kind of what this means. And there was a three caste system in Louisiana back then. And so you were either white, black, or mulatto, is what it said on the census. And this was like this for over 100 years. And the majority of the population fell under this mixed race. Well, when America purchased Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase, which was 16 states, it was pretty big. I mean, they were only 13, so it was a big deal. They said, we don't understand this three caste system, this middle thing. So we're casting that out. And now all the people in this middle race, which was the majority of the population, is now under the African American, and they don't have the rights that you had. So everything that you think you own, you no longer own land. You no longer have the jobs or the privilege or any of that. So they lost everything they had built for generations. And I tell you, they were trying to whitewash, because the lighter the color of their skin, the more privilege they did have. And I always say, if anyone wants to know about white privilege, well, here I am, because that's exactly what they did. And we didn't even know my great grandma's name until I did my tree. She had passed as white, and she had changed her name, denied her culture, denied her family, her last name. I mean, it was shocking to me. And so I had to go on the journey to find out what would make someone do that. And really, it came down to fear. And it also came down to, when you were of mixed race, you were not allowed to marry outside of your race. Well, if your whole goal was to whitewash, you weren't going to marry or be with anyone who was lighter than or darker than you. So these were the first single mothers. And being a mother and going to church, being Catholic, that's what they were. They were devoted mothers, and they were faithful to their religion. And that's all they had. They were only a mistress to somebody. And that man, the father of their children, it was legal for them to marry someone else. And they just had you, and would, use you, I guess, as they needed. And talk about debutante balls, they had them. They would have debutante balls, but they called them octoroon balls or quadroon balls, depending on how much African American you had in you.
Wow.
And yeah, and your white father would then negotiate with an eligible white bachelor to have children with him. And now your children could not become heir because it was illegal. But he would take care of you, make you a little, Creole cottage to live in, and you were just second best.
Wow.
So I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's interesting. I look at the women in my family and how all they breathe is their children and their religion and serving men. And I'll never forget my son's first birthday. My mom came up to me and said, "Aren't you going to feed your husband?" And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I get to feed my husband. I've waited for this my entire life. I've watched, all of my aunts and my mama and everyone serve, and now I get to do this. And then after a few years, I was like, wait, what? How did they do this? I'm about to lose my, SHID.
Yeah.
And, they just put on a smile, I guess, and did it, but it didn't work out for me. I really did lose my mind.
Right. Well, and I think that for so long, right, going back, that was just the way we were told to be, right? Or not us, but our ancestors, they were told that. That's just, and they didn't rock the boat. So
they didn't like to. The ones that did, we hear about.
And I admired my mama so much. She was my heart. And so many people, even today, will say, "Oh, you're just like mama." I get that all the time. And I used to just think it was just such an honor that someone would tell me that. But I'm like, she was a martyr. She was a martyr. That woman never thought of herself. She was selfless. The minute you walked in, she was, what can I get you? What can I make you? What can I do for you? I mean, never, ever for herself. Never. And that just, I don't know. It's not in me. It was in me. I did do it, but I failed.
I don't think it's failing. I think it's being true to yourself, right? Because I think when you just go and do what you're told to do
and don't question it,
you're just suppressing the real authentic you that's buried underneath all of that.
Of course, we were also told that children were to be seen, not heard. So that was a respect
Oh,
level, right? And so you were always muffled, silenced. And
right. And
thank
I
goodness.
learned that. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
it's nice today where you can actually speak your mind, and that's what we're doing. We're telling people, like, go out and find you, find what you love, find what find what gives you your bliss, find what excites you, right? That's what it's
oh,
about, us women in particular, right? We just shoved things back for so many years. It's nice to see the guys starting to come out a bit too. Men, they're starting to get into more of spirituality as well. It's like, whoa, what happened there? Because like that was
yeah.
just definitely not a male thing, right? But
Oh my gosh. And they're starting to step up as fathers. However, I must say, it's always the father at the line at the school that's screwing up. I'm like, you can't go that way, mister. Okay. All the moms are going, oh my gosh, the dad's making like a U-turn in the middle of like, the line to let kids out. Like, it was the
They're
system.
still learning. But at least
I'm
they're
joking.
trying.
At
Yeah,
least they're trying. It's amazing.
So do
I'm kidding. But
yeah.
yeah, it is interesting, and I love so much. It's Barb.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, you're just an inspiration coming, your generation, and that you're awakened to all this. I love to just imagine that there was a world all the time that was the women, had the freedom to use their voice like we're all doing right now. But this is new. This is very new, you know?
With me, when I broke away from the Catholic sort of way of being, it was so structured and so controlling, I found. And I didn't want to raise my children that way. And so I wanted them to be free to make choices. So became sort of a little sort of gypsy free love person. And
I love it.
and and I did that because it awakened me to say, I can believe in these other things and that's okay. And so
Yeah.
when I would teach my kids the same thing, like, no, you don't have to go the way that everyone else tells you. You can wear that to school because you can, right? And I know that when I was started doing sort of the hippie whatever thing, my mother just she came unglued a little bit, not realizing that all I was trying to do was just be my own person and do my own thing. So, way back in the 70s, I was trying to do that already. So, even Kimmy, sometimes as she was growing up, she'd say, yeah, Mom, you're a little bit of a gypsy,
Were
Sorry.
you love and peace? Like my mom is like that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Nice.
Yeah. Well, and I
But
think with you, what I remember was like, and maybe you were that way too. I wasn't so devout, obviously, but you
yeah.
always push back. Like even when the nuns at school would say something to you, you always ask why, right? Which back then I don't think, and even now, you get
Yeah.
that pushback, right? When you are questioning when someone's teaching you something religious or whatever, really.
I got the strap,
I know. So
for being indifferent, but I think it was like I couldn't swallow some of the things that they were trying to tell me. It was like, how? And explain. If you can explain it to me and make it sense, then okay, I'll swallow that maybe. But
Mhm.
I need to know the whole sequence of events in order to get my mind to connect with it enough to go, oh, okay.
Show me where it says that in the Bible. Okay,
Yeah.
you tell me where catechism comes in.
Yeah.
You know what I find is funny is the word choice, okay, in Greek is the word heresy. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Yeah, that yeah.
Nice.
And so they took away people's choice. They said, no, this is the word. There is nothing outside of this word,
Yeah.
and anything outside of that is heresy. And there is no, there's no choice here.
Yeah.
And that to me didn't sit right. It
That
doesn't
wasn't
sit right. Yeah.
That was so
Yeah.
true. That was so true. How much money you gave to the church and everything else was all part of how you lived. And my grandparents had 11 kids, and he still brought his envelope to the church every Sunday to give it. And yet, they were feeding a whole little crew their own, 11 kids. So
Yeah.
that was control too, right?
Yeah. You know what? This is so sad. My mama went to the same church like most of her life. She lived in New Orleans, and she would always go every week. I think she went every day, but she would write that check once a week. And she had been doing it forever. And it was like $20 is as much as she could give. And when she got Alzheimer's, one time she accidentally wrote the check for $200. And she was like only living off of Social Security at that point. So my aunt had went to the church and said, oh, my mother, she made a mistake. She wrote you a check for $200. And they said, oh, well, that's what she did. That's what she wanted.
Don't give it back.
They're like, but she wrote for the past 50 years, only $20.
Yeah.
But yeah,
They were
sad.
like, "Ooh, bonus."
Yeah, they're like, we must have done real good tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very sad, but I think like it's interesting that you did that journey to find out those things, because I think it does free you too.
It does.
By
It does
knowing
free you up.
what your past is and what, like you said, what the patterns are and how
Yeah.
that propels you. And now that you have children, what you're going to move forward with. We want them to know our lineage, but at the same point, we also want to teach them from it of what is right and what should probably just be left in the past, right? Just as
Yeah.
history.
And I have children from two different generations. So I have kids from 26 to 11. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
15 years. And so what's unfortunate is those earlier years, I was still in the, trying to be, the best American kind of thing, living this absolutely ridiculously inauthentic life. And one of the things that I often think about is how, I chose their religion before I even met them. I chose what they were going to believe in. In fact, beyond that, my son was going to be a baseball player. I wanted my daughter to be a ballerina. I had all of these ideas and dreams of what they were going to be. And I hadn't even met them. And I think that that's normal. I'm not saying, I think that most people do that.
Right.
But now looking back at that, that's crazy. And my younger daughter, who's 11, I was awakened already on my journey through this, and I've let her lead me. And in that, she's been my greatest teacher.
Nice.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot less undoing. My older kids are still undoing all of it.
Yeah.
And it's hard though, because we can't teach what we don't know, right? And so I think that's the whole thing with the more awake we get, the more that we find our true path, what's authentic to our souls. I think that's when our children watch us and the people around us watch us, and then they can figure out their stuff too, which may be similar or not. I did the same thing. Right. And in fact, right to the point that with both my boys, because it was important to my husband's mother at the time, baptized them Catholic. So they did get that. And I'm like, I feel like this is not right though, because I can tell you I'm not raising them that way. And then, I taught them something different. So it was kind of like it's on paper, but so you almost feel a little sacrilegious by doing that. But it wasn't what I felt true to raise those kids. And,
yeah. Are you a godmother to anyone? I'm a godmother.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I can't, I'll never forget. My godson came over when he was like 15, and his mom is Mandy, my ex co-host. And so he comes over and he goes, I just have some questions. My mom says that, I even taught Sunday school at one point. And he says, I just have some questions. And he goes, so what happened to Joseph? Was he just like the first deadbeat dad or what? Like, where did he go? And I was like,
Hilarious.
that's a very valid question.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Was because I was a pretty devout Catholic and I went to church all the time and everything else. And then when I started having the kids and that, and then my marriage started to deflate, put it in a nice way. And I went to the church to find out what they could do to help me. And they told me, you married him, he's got the devil in him. You need to stay with him no matter what and make that relationship happen. And that was where I went, yeah, that shit's not happening because it's just not happening.
They gave you the boot?
You know, I'm not staying in this marriage because it's volatile, right? So I mean,
like you marry him.
Yeah, here exactly. So that was sort of my punching ground where I went, okay, no, this isn't sitting with me, like you said. I'm not swallowing this at all, and I need to find another out. And that's where it all started for me. That was a long time ago. I think by the time it was probably about 3 by the time I started to search out psychology and things like that, another way out.
Yeah, because then you lost your community.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's hard.
It's certainly okay. It served me.
Yeah, it served you right.
It does you. So, you know, it's all works out in the wash in the end. You're allowed to change and make your choices. That's what's good about us now.
Yeah,
right?
Screw heresy.
Exactly.
You're so cute.
You know, that was one of the things that, after my ancestral journey, finally, after so long, I kept on saying, when's it going to end? But finally it did. And then it was just like, now what? And I didn't know what was to come, but I started to, through synchronicity, really, I started to study the Gnostic Gospels. And I'll tell you that I probably have a closer relationship with Jesus and his teachings of the Gnostic Gospels, and even in the Bible and in the New Testament, because I see them differently. So it's like I had been told all of these stories. I don't think I ever really read them. And I thought I read them, but I had read them with this idea of what the story was, because I had been told the story. And so when I picked up the Bible and read it for the first time with new eyes, I mean, oh my God, I didn't get past the first 2 chapters in Genesis before I was like, wait, what? I taught Sunday school. I did not know that Adam's daughters laid with angels. I mean, it's right there. And they, have Nephilims, what? What are Nephilims? These hybrid, beings. I'm like, wait, we're not talking about this kind of stuff at Sunday school.
That's true.
I mean, I was so shocked. And just a lot of things, but the Gnostic Gospels really, really, really did me in. I mean, they were found in the 1950s. I don't know if you remember that, Barb, but I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't, because they weren't going to be talking about that in the, break room at the church for sure. So, these were buried in the Nag Hammadi, and this wasn't the first scriptures found either. They were found in the 1700s. And Jesus was like a Zen master. I mean, he was speaking in allegorical stories that blew my socks off. I mean, a very deep, deep teaching of wisdom. And it's just been my journey. I've been just wrapped up in it, done a lot of deep diving and studying, and now I'm writing a book on it. So
good, perfect.
I'll have to read that one when it comes out.
It's always interesting how we get led to where we need to be, right? And to what we need to learn along our path.
Whether it's smacking you in the face or however. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, right, you doing the journey with your ancestral is led you to this, to a new awakening and a new belief, and right, and now to writing a book. So
I know.
It's interesting. I've been wanting to do the ancestral thing and I won't do it because
Oh, you should.
we're Aboriginal. And over the years, because my grandmother was adopted, but she was pure Ojibwa. And so, I mean, but I've never been able to get my status, no matter how I tried, because the government always put stops because it um, couldn't prove because of the adoption thing, sort of thing. But I would like to do the ancestral thing just to see how much shows up, of how much the native side is there. Now, I don't think it would make the government go, okay, you're allowed now. I don't know.
I could get status.
Did you?
I
Okay.
can, and I'll tell you, and it does, and the ancestry does help.
It
So
does.
I've connected with other descendants of Etienne, right?
Okay.
And so, and there's a lot, it's really hard with him too, because they just want to put him as a Métis and not as a First Nation for some reason. So you're not able to get that status, but you're able to get the Métis status for some reason. And there's a lot, it's really hard. I mean, it's really stupid too, because I mean, where are we getting the proof of any of this anyways? So I mean, if your blood says it is, then you should just say that it is. But there's like a 15% or something. I've heard something like that before. I'm not really sure, but I've connected with other descendants and we're so close. It's like these people were also called by, the same shaman, this ancestor. We're all the same, we all, I mean, it's almost like it's seriously, it's divine. And they have gotten their status. And I was like, well, I don't think I could. They're like, no, you can, even as an American. And I mean, I don't know what I would never use it, but so I never really pursued it, but I was told that I could. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
it is
very interesting.
I help people do this actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've probably done like, I don't know, 200 or so trees. So once I got through my ancestry, I had done so much, to connect with my ancestors that I put it into a program to help other people. I didn't mean to at first, but people said, well, hey, can you help me? And I'd be like, yes. And so then it just turned into helping so many people and then creating an entire program where I could coach them through it. And I actually build them their tree for them. I don't even need your DNA. I'm really good at it because yeah, and I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. And I think that's people need that, right? Because it is, when you start doing it, it's very overwhelming. Because I started, right? I had a little bit of things there, and then I started, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just so hard.
I know. And you know what? There's a lot of false information out there too. So, I mean, you go down one wrong, pick one wrong person, you're on somebody else's lineage.
Yes.
So I know all the tricks of the trades of how to verify each line. And if I can't verify it, I don't go down it. But I've gotten people to the year 600.
Wow. That's awesome.
That is wow.
Wow. Very cool.
Maybe you'll have to help us then.
I would love to. I would love to.
I studied it. I worked on it for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And I kept going back and going back and didn't matter how much I tried at it. I even went down to Georgina Islands, which is where we're from, and talked to the chief there. And he gave me a scroll of people that out from way back, sort of thing, and told me stories of my family. And even with doing that, and giving the government that information, they weren't interested. It's really interesting because it's like, if they don't want you to be that, you don't get there, right? And it's like, that's not fair. That's not fair, because my grandmother was pure Ojibwa, and so I mean, it should never happen that way, but it did. So yeah, it's nice to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, the injustice is, especially, well, here too in America, of course, both. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
It's not necessary.
And still today, heartbreaking, and just
yeah.
Not necessary at all. Wow, you're full of information, young lady.
Yeah, I would love to help you. I'm not even kidding. I've learned so much history. I've found Salem witches in people's trees. I have found, most of
Gotcha.
all of the different, royal, families, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of information in there. And so you usually can find or see a story, or just like, for instance, this is like something that I like to share because it gives like an example of how it can be healing. So I had a friend and her mom didn't really know her dad very well. In fact, he did his own thing, had a million children, moved all around the world, never stayed in one place. He wasn't, a stable father figure for any of his many children. And when we did her ancestry, we could see that when he was born, lived with his grandmother right away. And then he moved in as like 12 years old. In the next census, you could see he lived over here. And then by the time he was 17, he had signed up for the military. He had never, ever had anything stable, since he was a little tiny baby. And his
That's
mom
nice.
was over here, and you could see him moving. You could see the residence, you could see his stories, you could see all of the paperwork on the different wars and the places that he had been. And she just all of a sudden had compassion for him for the first time. She said, "My God, it wasn't that he didn't love me. He just never really had love himself."
Mhm.
And she just was like, I just, my whole life, I just thought he just didn't like me,
So sad. It's a sad story, really.
but really, it truly gave her a different perspective, and just to see him moving around so much. So you can really learn a lot about them. So,
Absolutely. And I think it can heal, like you said, right? Once you can look at that from a different perspective.
Oh, totally.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
I think it's
it's not,
important that we
it's not for the lighthearted. There's, all of our ancestors have good and bad in them.
absolutely.
There's a lot that people have gone through and continue to, but yeah, back then they kept really good documents, especially the Vatican and like the archdiocese. They kept better records than the government,
Yep. No, it
Yeah.
and
does.
you could use your baptism as legal documents
Yeah,
back then.
yeah.
So yeah,
Not
you
today.
find out a lot. No.
You can, but you have to have a long form or whatever the case may be. It's crazy.
Well, you
Oh
have
yeah.
so much information. Flew by.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
See, we'll go on your show too, and but you'll have to come back on ours too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So can you tell
yeah.
everybody where they can find you?
Yeah. So everything they could find at senseofsoulpodcast.com. They can
Okay.
find my podcast. They can find like the clear workshop is what it's called, my ancestral workshop. I do also teach Reiki, and I do it also, via internet, Zoom. I have different healing. One's called soul immersion. It's kind of like a meditation that I do with my clients, and then I do the art of the visual that I see.
Okay.
So that's really fun. And I also have a coaching program. It's more of a mentorship, but it's 7 weeks. And I enjoy that so very much. They usually become my friends for life. So just making more soul connections. But yeah, if anyone wants to talk to me or have any questions, I have a soul chat that it's free. You just have to, get on there and connect with me. And yeah, and I'd love to have you guys on my podcast. And so I could learn more about you guys.
Yeah, we'd love
We'd
to.
love to.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it so much.
We do, we really do, and you have lots of information for us.
You
Lots to
do.
think about.
Yeah. So thanks for being with us, and we really enjoyed it, and you're welcome back anytime. And then everybody else, please, we'll see you next week.
You betcha.